The name of this panel is Creating Our Democratic Destiny, Responsible Tech, AI, Learning, Working, and Leadership. So we'll give a few minutes to each one, and we'll do the best we can. That's a lot to cover in 50 minutes. Luckily, we have 4 distinguished leaders, all global-minded honorees. So let's meet them now. And we're going to come from the far left down to the right. Our K-12 award winner is the president and CEO of Digital Promise, whose goal is to shape the future of learning and expand opportunity for every learner by bringing together solutions across research, practice, and technology. Please welcome Jean-Claude Brizard. Our Higher Education Award winner is President Emeritus of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, who chaired President Obama's Advisory Commission on Educational Excellence for African Americans, Dr. Freeman A. Hrabowski III. Our Global Impact Award winner is the General Manager for Global Education at Amazon Web Services, where she leads strategy and initiatives for higher education, research, K-12, edtechs, and outcome-based education worldwide, Valerie Singer. And our Energy and Sustainability Award winner is the Executive Director of Global Manufacturing Engineering for General Motors, where she believes putting people first is the engine of real innovation, Telva McGruder. The diversity of America has often been called a gorgeous mosaic, and that's how I think of this panel. We have 4 successful Americans coming from 4 different life experiences. So I want to direct the same question to all 4 of them. Jean-Claude, your family fled a ruthless dictator in Haiti to come to America. As a political refugee, what does American democracy mean to you?
I really wish they were accepted as refugees when they came to the U.S. My parents escaped in 1970, but let me go back a little bit. My grandfather was an orchestra conductor, and that was his bully pulpit to speak out against the atrocities of this despot. And Duvalier and his son killed about 250,000 people in Haiti. Not a big country, a small country. Spent 6 years in prison. He was taken in the middle of the night, spent 6 years in prison. My family made so much noise, they couldn't kill him. So my parents escaped and came here. My mom got a visa to the U.S. My father did not. Ended up in Algeria, Senegal, France, and in the U.S. So for 6 years we were separated, and they were undocumented in the U.S. for 3 years. My father got here. But my parents chose to come to the U.S. They weren't sent here. Like many of us former slaves, we were brought to this country. My parents chose America because for them that was a beacon of democracy, the beacon of hope, wanting to give their kid a future. My parents were educators. Father was a school principal. Mom was a teacher. We were the small class of middle class in Haiti. And they came here on food stamps. My father was at a factory. My mom was a nurse's aide. And so they work hard for us. And so I tell my kids all of the time that we owe your grandparents to give back to this country. So America, for me, is the land of opportunity. It is the place where you can be and whatever you want to be. I've always believed that. I continue to believe that. And I have 3 young boys that I push all of the time to understand that, to understand those stories. Because, again, this is the place where we can make it happen. And I will do whatever I have to do to make sure that work continues.
Thank you. Freeman, as a child in Birmingham, Alabama, you were once jailed for marching with the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and you knew one of the young black girls who died in the 16th Street church bombing. As a proud fighter for the civil rights movement, what does American democracy mean to you?
it means, first of all, it is so encouraging to look into the audience and to see the faces of people who represent all of humanity at a time when, give us all a round of applause, at a time when we are told we should almost be embarrassed to use the word diversity, when women are told they shouldn't be in leadership positions. It is so encouraging. I am from the deep South of America. I work in Baltimore, which is the upper South. One day we think like Philadelphia, the next day like Richmond, but I am from Alabama, Birmingham. But this is what I need people to understand. I am the product of both a slave owner and a slave. My great-grandfather was the slave owner, and my great-grandmother was his slave. She didn't have a choice but to bear him children. And so some of the furniture in my home comes from that plantation. And so there is, when I think about American democracy, when I think about the Constitution, I think about the fact that my forebears were not considered fully human. They were a fraction. And yet you heard me say last night, I believe in this country because I know, first of all, that we are far from perfect, that American democracy is an evolving concept, evolving. We are far from there at this point. And when I think about where we are today, what American democracy means for me, it is this concept that we want to constantly be better, that we make progress and then we get knocked back. And going to jail, we made progress in so many ways, and we have been knocked back in some ways. For women and your rights, and for people of color, and we think about voting rights that have been now gutted, we have been knocked back. But I believe in the concept of American democracy because I do believe in humanity, that we believe in fairness and justice. Many people don't realize that Socrates and Plato did not believe in democracy because they thought that democracy meant voting by popularity, and they didn't believe that most people were educated enough to make the right choices. And yet, I do believe, because I'm an educator, we can teach people, this is the point, to make the right choices. And so for me, American democracy means we're constantly fighting to educate people to believe in fairness and integrity and justice. And that's the fight we have.
Thank you very much. Valerie, you did not come from a family of affluence. You entered the workplace at the age of 12 as someone whose career dreams have exceeded what you might have allowed yourself to dream at that age. What does American democracy mean to you?
So first of all, I want to just underscore what Freeman said and just thank this entire body of people for coming together and for sharing ideas. I was having breakfast this morning and just talking to so many of you about your experiences and what you're bringing to students and what the students are bringing in terms of their insights. But yeah, my experience was rocky. I started working, taking and typing when I was 11. And I had a little IBM Selectric in my bedroom and took in transcriptions and got paid by the page. I was a Girl Friday at 13. I worked in a law firm when I was 15. And then I worked at that law firm until I was 23 while I was kind of plunking my way through school and working other jobs at the same time. So I didn't have a normal childhood. I didn't have a childhood that was free. I didn't have a childhood where I could afford to do anything because all of my spare time was spent either working or taking care of my younger brother. I had two of my immediate family in the justice system, and that was a tough go as well. And so my older brother was in and out of the justice system, and my father was too. And so it was tough. But when I think about the systems that we have in place in this country that we all really have access to. And I was in and out of universities in the community college system. I was at University College for a little bit at Maryland. And so, I made my way through with a lot of perseverance. Those systems are still in place. They feel a little fossilized right now and a little bit at risk, but they are there for us. The healthcare system is still in place. The education system in this country is still in place. We still have free press. We still have self-correcting mechanisms in elections. And so democracy for me should be an advantage to everybody and not the chosen few. And we are one of the few countries where that still is the case. We need to rely on organizations like this one to give access to people who don't have voices. And I had strong mentorship when I went into the law firm. The lawyers at that law firm saw something in me and really helped me along, and that was just a gift to me, and I learned to both cultivate mentors and mentor back. I'll give you one story I was thinking about this morning, because I was told last night that I didn't look back. Like, once I sort of persevered past my own past, I looked back. I didn't look back on it, and I said, well, it's the end of it, and moved on. And so this conference has really been a reflective moment for me to think back on my own childhood. But I mentored and worked with a little girl in Montgomery County, Maryland, for several years through CASA, which is the Guardian Ad Litem program in Montgomery County courts. And she was she was in quite dire straits. And she was living 12 people in a group home with her mother and two siblings who were also in serious with serious challenges. And I don't know if I helped her in those 3 years, but I have to believe that every time we touch somebody in a positive way, that it may be a delayed reaction, that they take that value later. You might not see it in the moment, but it's important that we keep at it, and that every day, that every year, that every couple of years, whatever it is that you do to reach youth in your community, that you do it. And so I hope, her name is Gabby, I hope that Gabby, who's now grown, saw value in those 3 years that we had together. I certainly believe that to be true. But you never know where mentorship is going to take you, and so it's really important to keep touching people who might not have had the touch points in their own lives without you being there. So all of that to me is democracy.
Thank you.
It's so important for the students to hear. It is that a part of the American democracy is that we and I want the students to hear, is that we understand, as this conference is saying, as GlobalMindED is saying, that it is our responsibility to be concerned about the common good, that children who've not had the advantage of going to college should have that advantage, and that we're here for you. That's a part of the American democracy, that we believe in you. And that's her point, and that is what American democracy is all about. It's so important.
And thank you for that, Freeman. And I also think that as we're hearing, and I want Telva to talk now, we're hearing the different ways that we who are born here may not realize what a beacon of hope this is to people who are not born here. The notion, Freeman, that you mentioned about we're always striving, that the phrase that it goes back to our founding is more perfect union. We're not there already. We're getting there. It's an endeavor. And then, Valerie, one of the heartening parts of your story is there were people out there who you did not know as a very young child who were willing to help you. They were willing to be an angel for you in a way that you could never have predicted. And that's something that every student here can be taking. But now I want to get to Telva, and I want her to tell this amazing story, because you're watching a television documentary, and in a way, the future of your life opens for you. And that's also going to connect to what democracy means to you. Can you tell us about that?
Wow, you have pumped that up. Yes. Oh my goodness. So when I was about 14 years old, I was watching television at a time when we only had about 4 channels. And there was a show on about the first artificial heart implantation into a human. And I watched the show, and we called it the Jarvik heart. And they showed the pump that was effectively the thing that would pump blood instead of our human heart. And they talked about the engineer that had designed it, and they talked about the patient, of course, Robert Jarvik, as well as the doctor that implanted the heart. Well, I knew what a patient was, and I knew what a doctor was. I did not know what an engineer was, but what I did know was that if you could be something like an engineer and help people live, I wanted to learn more. I went to my father, and I said, what's an engineer? And he was like, the guys that drive the train, no, that's probably not what you're talking about, right? And then he said, well, if it's like those guys that come around at work, my dad was hourly, at General Motors, actually. And he said, those guys are annoying. I don't know what they're actually supposed to be doing. And so he said, why don't you go look it up in the encyclopedia, which is, all right, that was our Google. So I went to the encyclopedia, and it was okay. Then I was like, well, I had a library on the way home. And so I decided to go to the library and start investigating, like, what is an engineer? And I started learning a lot about engineering and all the things engineers could do. And ultimately decided that I wanted to be an engineer because I wanted to help people. I wanted to create a different future. I went to my counselor at high school, and I said, hey, I think I want to be an engineer. And she looked at me and she said, well, there aren't many women that are engineers, and there aren't many black people that are engineers, and maybe you should pick something else. And I looked at her and I said, well, I don't know that that's a reason I should pick something else. So if you come up with like any information that will help me figure out how to do this, please get it to me. And she did, right? It wasn't that she didn't care. It wasn't that she was worried about me, right? And she wanted me to be successful. She was worried about me. And so it turned out that, information came to the school, and she did share it. And then I found a path to get to engineering school through a scholarship, which I desperately needed. But here are the things. Here's what's interesting about democracy. Democracy, and it plays into this, to my story. Democracy happens at many different levels. It happens at the local level. It happens at the state level. It happens at the national level in our country. And a well-operating democracy, as we've defined it here in the U.S. and in many other countries, happens at all of those levels. So had we not had voting and decisions at the local level, I wouldn't have been able to go to the library. Okay? Had we had different rules around education, I wouldn't have been able to be in the school that I was in.
Was it integrated?
My school was integrated, but I was one of very few black people in that school.
What city?
I was in Dayton, Ohio.
The North.
Yes, in the north. Yes, I was in the north. However, not long before I entered school, it hadn't been that way, right? So, that access to information, that access to education is a fundamental premise of our democracy, as we've been talking about, and it's critically important. And then to realize, and then when I did go to university, right, there were programs for me as, minority introduction to engineering and things like that, which was absolutely fantastic, but that had to be funded from somewhere. Yes. I went to a public university. There's discretion on how to use those public dollars. So democracy is founded on listening to what people need, and sometimes that sound has to be very loud for us to get what we need and to make progress, assuming there will be some steps back. So people must speak, people must be heard, and then there are people that we choose, that we elect, that are deciding what to do with what they hear, okay? And that is democracy. There are people that are doing research, that are sharing information. That's another way of speaking. And then there are people that we elect that are determining what they do with that information that they're learning, right? Like, that is democracy in action. We have to not be silent. And for as long as we continue to speak, and for as long as we expect people to hear, then our democracy will continue. It's not always going to be beautiful. It's not always going to be perfect. But that back and forth creates environments where people can have access to information and learn and grow. And that's fundamental. And that's what democracy means to me.
I don't think I pumped her up too much. I think she completely met the challenge. And these are all four wonderful stories. Let me now get to where we are as a country right now. American democracy. Are we floundering? Are we flourishing? I'd like you all to tell me, starting with Jean-Claude and coming this way, what number would you give to how strong our democracy is right now? So one would be medieval darkness that is everyone's getting tortured or whatever, and 10 would be all of the founding fathers are in heaven high-fiving each other over how we have realized their dreams. If you wanted to give us a number.
For someone who's trying to get rid of standardized testing, you're asking me to give a number to a particular score. Bigger believer in competency-based education. But you know what? I'll give it a 6. Let me qualify that. What worries me about our country is that we carry a lot of hubris, thinking that we're perfect, that we are the beacon of the world. In many ways, we are. A lot of folks look to us for direction. Right now, I'm worried, frankly, about our country. Let me give you some examples. I go to this thing called the Education World Forum in London. About 140 nations come together. The ministers of education come. We talk about education reform, education renewal, AI, you name it. We have never had a secretary from the U.S. show up in its 20-year history. Each time I go, they put my face on the screen as the U.S. representative. I am not. But no one ever shows up. Betsy DeVos was the closest one we ever got to come, and she didn't come because of the pandemic. So as if we have nothing to learn from the rest of the world. I advise the Lego groups. I'm in Denmark all of the time, and I can tell you there are wonderful things happening in parts of Europe that we can take from, in parts of Africa we can take from. I was in Uruguay last spring, one of our partner organizations visiting with Sebal. They have closed the digital learning gap. During the pandemic, they decided we're no longer not going to have issues with technology access for people. The Wi-Fi signal is ubiquitous across the country. No matter where you go, it's free, it's available, buses, homes. Every child, every teacher has a device they're using. Not around technology for technology's sake, but technology to support the learning process. So I worry that because of our hubris, that we don't seem to feel as if we need to learn from anybody else. I was in China back in November with 40 leaders looking at AI in education. They're kicking our butt. So all to say is that there's, tremendous potential in this country. We've got the intelligence, we've got the capacity, we've got the brilliance in scientists, et cetera, in research, you name it. I'm watching it, some of it being dismantled. The Office of Education Technology was gotten rid of in today's age. So that worries me a lot. But at the same time, there's a lot, I heard yesterday, I forgot the speaker, there's more of us who are fighting on the positive end, the negative end. We got to keep the fight going. That's what gives me a lot of hope, frankly, in our country, because we know we've got the intellectual powerhouse to make it happen. The political will also has to match. So maybe a 6, we can be the 10, which again, why I love this country, because we think, there are many of us who know this is a work in progress, but we've got the Northern Lights, we've got the North Star that we are striving forward. But the one thing that would kill us if we're not careful is the kind of hubris so many of us carry as a country around the world.
Thank you. Freeman.
I am always thinking about the fact that whatever I say, my grandson will see. And he is 14. He's just old enough now to have critical thinking skills, and he wants to hear what I say. And I've always been critical of people as they get older because they tend to become more critical, more cynical. And I'm working very hard not to become cynical. My last book is called The Resilient University. We fall down, but we get back up. And the last chapter is entitled Hope. And I do have hope that we're going to get back up. We have fallen down. By all measures, we have fallen down. We got rid of that wonderful international program that helped children all over the world, and thousands of babies are dying every day because we just got rid of AIDS. And we don't see those babies dying, but they are dying. And we need to feel that pain. I don't say that to depress, but I say it to make sure we keep our eyes open, because the strength of a democracy, for me, is measured by our ability to be compassionate, to feel for humanity. And I want my grandson to feel for humanity. We are fine for children of privilege. They are okay. I worry about them, though, if they only become greedy human beings. I know that Thurgood Marshall is crying wherever he is now, because the Supreme Court is a disgrace. Some members of the Supreme Court have said it. The decisions that they've made. It's so sad, really is, that, when the Social Security Act was passed in 1935, FDR, wealthy people said he was an embarrassment to his class. We now think of the Social Security Act as wonderful for vulnerable families. We think of women, widows getting that check. All of us, our grandmamas, looking for their Social Security check. It's a wonderful thing. Vulnerable people. But wealthy people said, shouldn't be our responsibility to take care of poor people. That's their fault. That was where America was in the 30s. Wealthy people didn't care, but we became more enlightened. And that's social network. And FDR did that. American democracy was strengthened by that. Okay? But today, as we hear about the Speaker of the House quietly talking about taking away fundamental rights of people, we are weakening our democracy. I still believe there will be hope, because we see the protests from people. And I do believe through voting, we will turn this around. And it's all about who is in office. And I'm not talking about a party. I'm talking about who the people are who will have the compassion for the vulnerable ones. Right now, we should be measuring our strength as a democracy by what happens to vulnerable children. And right now, we don't talk about education. It's not a priority that you hear about in our American society. We don't talk about education. Our children cannot read. And as a mathematician, if a child can't read, she can't do word problems. And her future is not solid. And so I would give us a 5, but we have a long way to go.
Okay. Valerie?
I'm going to riff off of yours, if you don't mind. Because I think there's a lot to be said there. And I'm also going to endorse a 5. Because I do believe, as I said before, that we have a lot of self-correcting mechanisms in this country. And one of those are elections. And to put the right candidates in place who can have the compassion and who understand the systems that need to be put in place for a governing democracy are really important. We are at a stage in our democracy where all of our national leaders are really, really old, and we need to make sure that young people have the courage of their convictions and get involved in the process. And I'm very, very hopeful about that. I see many, many, many local races where young people are starting to step up, including in my own county, where one of the oldest congressmen, Steny Hoyer, is now, thank goodness, stepping down and leaving it to younger people to come in and think new ideas. And this is important, right? But if you think about FDR, and you think about Social Security, and you think about the NRA, and all of the progressive social programs that were passed in FDR's time, he was a really galvanizing force. And he went to the Supreme Court and he said, if you step in my way, I'm going to pack this court and I'm going to change things. And so you step in my way. And they didn't. They did not step in his way. And so it's really important to also make sure that we have leaders in place who understand the importance of the programs and the process of government, and that we make sure we know who they are. And so let me go back to education for a minute. It's really incredibly critical that we think about our educational systems, including our public education systems, and one of the biggest challenges we have right now is attrition, right? So freshman class of public universities, four-year universities, is about, they maintain about 79% of their freshman class. So 21% of students who go into universities in their freshman year in public universities in this country drop out. And when they drop out, they tend to not go back. They tend to drop out with debt. They don't get involved in the civic society in which they live. There's a huge penalty to students who don't who don't stay in college. And that's not even saying, which is true, that higher education also pays a price. They lose billions of dollars every year on attrited students. And so it's really important for us to help you stay where you are and stay convicted and and if you need to off-ramp for a little while, to build the systems in place so you can do that. If you need to have a year off, a gap year, so that you can work and then come back, we need flexible systems in place so that democracy can flourish. And so when I think about the flexibility that we need to build in, all that comes with you thinking differently about how democracy is going to serve you. Because it's not going to be us up here. It's going to be you. And so, we're here to help facilitate and to make that happen for you. But let's all, from this point forward, think about the leaders who can be more like FDR and say, you know what, I am power, and I'm going to keep speaking truth to you. And let's also make sure that we bring up the next generation of leaders, whether you are civically engaged in a campaign, whether you're civically engaged with organizations like GlobalMindED, whether you run yourself and build that kind of system so that we can think differently and build the next generation's democracy. So I'm going to give it a 5, but I know that we have a lot of headroom to do amazing things for it to get us to that perfect 10.
Thank you very much, Valerie. And a lot of people at the time wanted FDR to be a dictator, and there was a sense that maybe the capitalist system we had wasn't working, and we need a dictator. And he had the courage and the character to refuse to take that role. And when he was told, "You are a traitor to your class," his response was, "I welcome their hatred," because it was the right thing to do. And there's a great book by Jonathan Alter called The Defining Moment that's about the first 100 days of FDR's first administration that you might want to read. It's incredible. Okay, Telva, you're going to cast a deciding vote here as we figure out where we think democracy is. Tell us your thoughts.
All right. I have to go back to what you just said. I am power, and I'm going to tell truth to you. Oh my gosh, that's amazing, right? For people to understand that they do have power, right? And that speaking the truth is actually what's going to deliver us through. For all people to understand that, that would be one of the key things to help us in our democracy, despite how people are being treated in our democracy, right? I just had to, pipe on that. So, I was sitting here and I was like, where are we? I'm definitely with Jean-Claude on this. I'm absolutely, I am an optimist. It's hard for me to go down as low as 5. I'm going to go at 6, so I'm not going to cast a deciding vote.
Okay.
But what I'm also aligned with him on is this idea of potential, And I'll speak of this from a corporate environment where we are, we think about what is our expectation, what meets our expectation, and what exceeds our expectation, and what doesn't meet our expectation. And this democracy is not meeting my expectation. But why is that? So when I'm thinking about that with like an individual at work or a department or something like that, I'm thinking about what could they be doing and what are they doing? And if they're not delivering on their potential, they are not meeting expectations. And that's, effectively the same message that Jean-Claude shared with us. This democracy is not delivering on its potential. And we do have so many intelligent people. And right now we're not demonstrating in our democracy and our elected officials and in many, frankly, unelected people that we are up for critical thinking and active debate. We are not demonstrating that. And the only way that we can create a better future is to actively invite the debate, right? As FDR did, to say, I welcome that. Now let's go at it. Let's actually have that debate. Let's look at the pros and cons and let's figure out what the solution's going to be. And it's not going to be perfect, but it should be moving us forward rather than getting frustrated or just shutting down and not fulfilling our duties because things aren't exactly as we want them, right? And marginalizing swaths of people that are really just trying to live. That's not a healthy democracy. So we have to expect more of our elected officials. We have to expect more of ourselves because the voice that we're creating right now isn't as strong as it should be because we are so divided. So those are my thoughts, but I stick at 6 because I think if we commit to not being so superficial, okay, it's actually not hard to come off of the surface a little bit. That can start to build our momentum to move forward. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you very much. And I think one of the things that we're seeing here, yes, a round of applause. And what we're seeing here is we're seeing a clear assessment of exactly where we are, which is one of the ways that you begin to solve problems is to see them clearly. And even though we're at a 5.5 right in the middle of the pack, there is still a sense of optimism that the best in what we aspire to be can handle the worst of what we sometimes are. So let me ask all of here, we're 5.5 right now with this panel for where we think American democracy is. How many of you, by show of hands, would rate it below 5.5?
Let me say this as a math teacher. That average as a math teacher, that's more a whether that's a mean or a median students. This is the question. Okay, because see, here's the deal. We are all very privileged people sitting up here. Okay, and so when I'm talking, for privileged people, America is not a bad place at all. We can drive our cars. Right? We can go to the restaurant. We sat last night, had a ball. We got on nice clothes and everything. But when I was in Mississippi, I cried. Because for poor people, wherever they are, it's hell. They're trying to feed their families. And if you were to ask them right now, they would give it a 2. And when they're told that when they vote, it doesn't matter anymore, that everybody from their state is mainly going to be a white man who doesn't care about them, it's a 0. And their voice will sound just like this. People don't care about me in Mississippi, in Alabama. They don't care. I thought my vote would matter. It no longer matters. And that black man on the Supreme Court doesn't give a damn about me. You get what I'm saying? And there's an anger. And my children can't read. This is what we have in America. And it's not just about race. For poor people and people in power don't hear that. And you hear the president of the United States saying, I'm not worried about the finances of people, they'll be all right. You know, there's a deafness, a tone deafness. Would you give me a round of applause for telling the truth? Would you?
Yeah. Well, but let us finish this vote of the room and see if there are, how many people, by show of hands, would say above 5.5? Okay, there are some people. Okay, great. And I think one of the things also that Freeman's getting to that I think a lot about in the last several years, there are things I thought growing up that were settled cultural progress that I never imagined would be taken back. That first there was an injustice, then there was a hard-fought battle, then there was a victory, and I thought victory was the last step. It is not. And the phrase that I used to hear growing up, that the price of liberty is eternal vigilance, I didn't get it until recently.
It's so true. And you know, I could never have imagined students.
Take the microphone.
I could never have imagined sitting in a room like this. As a child, I never saw black and white people sitting together, ever. All right? I could never have imagined sitting on this stage. We have made a lot of progress, okay? And attitudes of people have improved dramatically, of so many people, of all races. We've made and so American democracy in many ways is a gift. In many ways, it is. There's so many decent people. Why do I have hope? I tell my grandson, because there are a lot of decent people of all races. When Dr. King said, judge people by the content of their character, it's true. And I do believe most Americans are decent. I do believe that. It just so happens that some people in power, somehow their mamas didn't teach them right. I mean that. I mean that. Let me tell you a story. Bull Connor was the police commissioner in my state, and he's the one who threw me into the police wagon and spat on me when I went to march. And when he died, my mother called me. I was in college, and she was crying. I said, Mama, why would you cry about that man? I hate him. He was nasty. He was mean. He spat on me and threw me in the police. And she said, Freeman, I cry because he was somebody's child. And his mother taught him to hate people who looked like you. How sad that he never learned to love other people. She said, cry for him. He spent his life hating people. And before I knew it, I was crying. And all the hatred left. And I learned, as she said, don't hate people. Hate what they do, but don't hate people. And that's a part of democracy.
And that deserves a round of applause. And would anyone else like to chime in on this? Because I feel like we've discovered a very interesting vein of discussion. Telva, would you like to? Do we have? Oh, you have a microphone.
I think I do have a microphone. I do. Look at that. I think that's absolutely true. You know, we have to pay attention to what's going on around us. We have to pay attention to why it's going on. And oftentimes, if we try to look at what's in front of our faces, we're missing it, right? So, that idea of listening with the third ear, seeing with the third eye, it's really important, and that is true when it comes to people in all different stations of their lives, right? Judging people based on where they are, right? Because they are poor, because they are rich, right? That's not necessarily the right thing to do. And frankly, it gets in the way of us solving problems, right? When we I'll go back and we stay on the surface and we think we know what's going on, guess what? We are wrong. We are wrong. If we really want to drive change, which, what does change look like? If you're a college student, change can look so many different ways. It can look like, I'd like to have a better chance of having a job when I graduate. right, than I do today. Like, if we as adults that support that want to drive that change, then we have to go deep. We have to go beyond, well, those students aren't trying hard enough, or they're just not majoring in the right thing. We have to go deep. And we have to expect a lot more than we expect, I think, is really critically important in order for our democracy to get stronger. And we have to have confidence that we can figure out a way. One thing I love, and I'll leave it at this, like, if there's a problem on the table, and goodness knows in this country we have plenty. If there's a problem on the table, there's effectively an infinite number of ways to solve that problem. And what we get caught up in is exactly how we're going to solve it, as opposed to the fact that we have a problem to solve, right? And then we start fighting about how we're going to solve it, and then we lose sight of the fact that we have a problem to solve, right? But there's so many different ways to do it, and so sometimes we have to let go of the way we think it needs to be done in the interest of accepting the fact that if we go this other direction, it will get done. Maybe what we debate then is how long it takes, right? And so, we can't ignore the realities that people are going through. We have to lean into them.
I would agree with all of that. Thank you. Give you a little bit of an international perspective. I do spend a lot of my time outside the United States, and aside from the fact that people will come up to me and say, it's kind of interesting these days in the U.S. because they don't know which way I go. so things are kind of interesting. I'm like, I did not vote for that man. But anyways, so I was being so, but I will tell you that we have this, I think, this sense that, oh my God, everybody from outside the United States is looking at us and saying, what the hell is wrong with you people? And it's actually not true. They still believe that the United States is a beacon of democracy. They still see that the United States is a place where they aspire to go. And this is around the world. Like, so I just spent a month in Australia and in Singapore. I spend a lot of time in Europe. And wherever I go, they say, look, we understand that governments come and go because you have an election system where you have the power to change that. But we still believe, when we look from this side over the pond or around the world, wherever they are, that what you're doing is fundamentally different and sound and good for people. And so I do think when we think about democracy and all of the changes that we need to be the problem solvers and not the problem identifiers and the problem hand-wringers. But we still, around the world, have an enormous amount of respect. Now, I also believe that structurally it's probably going to take us 20 years to fix some of the challenges that Freeman pointed out. Problems with distrust with NATO, problems with USAID and rebuilding that system again if we choose to do that. All of those things structurally are challenging, but we can do it. Might not be in years of my lifetime, but we will do it. And so that gives me hope too, that other countries around the world are like, you guys got a pretty good thing going, right? But I will say that democracy should not be for chosen few. Yeah. And so we still need to say, if you want a job, we need to figure out how we protect your experience as you go through college, as you go through your system, so it's not this bumpy ride trying to figure out how to pay for it or how to access systems, or I need to take a break and I don't know if I have another on-ramp and I don't see a way back in, so that we create those on-ramps for you so you can participate and get to the next stage of where you are. And that's why I think this democracy has the flexibility to adapt and to be the next thing that we need it to be, so it serves everybody. That I truly believe that.
And the only way, we're going to be successful is through education. What you're seeing is a failure of education. Let me qualify that. We've narrowed the curriculum to a place where we obsess over proficiency in math and reading without getting into fluency. Without really understanding what propels democracy are things like critical thinking. Can you collaborate across difference? Do you have agency? Most of the folks who watch only one news channel in their life, who don't know how to expand their horizon and see different perspectives and have conversations, That's something we have to bake into our curriculum, into our pedagogy, into our K-12 system. Otherwise, what's happening now is going to continue. This is a failure of public education.
Awesome.